Okay, so this video, this subject matter that I'm going to be discussing is going to be on the understanding and the assumption that I have a mature subscriber base. That is to say, the subject I'm going to be talking about is something that some people would find, very funny or something to banter about. But I want to talk about this from a serious angle because actually it does create a lot of unhappiness. And the subject is involuntary celibacy. Or to put it another way, people who cannot have sex for a variety of reasons, who simply don't have the opportunities. Now, from the outset, I want to make it clear this is very, very different from voluntary celibacy or the choice of abstinence. There are people who choose not to have sex. It could be for religious reasons, so for example, monks, nuns. It could be because they just don't want it at a particular time, i.e., they do want to wait. Um, and it's men and women. So that's totally different from what I'm going to be talking about. And by the way, I totally respect that. It's fine. I certainly don't look down on those people, but I don't look up to them either. I don't think they're better than anyone else. They just have made that decision, and fair play to them. But for me, what I want to discuss is the issue of involuntary celibacy. Now, I'm going to be absolutely honest here. I can relate to this issue to some extent because I'm not a virgin, but I found that my opportunity for sex came quite late in life. Um, let's say later, well, not late in life, that's wrong because I'm still young, but later than most people, let's put it that way. I know I'm not going to go into the details in this video, but you get the idea. It was later than most people. And I can honestly say, the frustration and loneliness that came about from the constant wondering will it ever happen is, we laugh about it, but actually it can create a great deal of unhappiness. And that's no laughing matter because when people are unhappy for a prolonged period of time, it then leads to more serious problems like serious clinical depression. Now, what I find is that there's very, very little understanding of this because it tends to fall into several avenues of responses. One of them is that those who do talk about this, and not many people do because there is a social stigma, but those who do are then dismissed as being, crazy for sex. Like that's all they think about. But if you have a relatively normal sexual history experience, i.e., not more, not less than other people, you maybe lost your virginity in, say, your early 20s. I don't know. For someone who's had a standard experience, if I could put it that way, they've got no right to judge. They have no right to say, oh, you're a sex obsessed. Because this is a basic human desire. It really, really is a basic human desire. Um, what I would also say is that, so that's one, I was going to get onto the other area. The other approach would be well intentioned, but again, not particularly helpful. Oh, sex isn't that great. It's nothing to look forward to. Don't worry about it. It's really not as good as it cracked out to be. Maybe it's not. And it's true that people who have more access to sexual opportunities can have boring sexual experiences. So that is also true. But again, you wouldn't say to a child, oh, Christmas is no big deal. Santa Claus will give you presents, but hey, it's nothing to look forward to. If you never experience something, then it's always going to be interesting. It's always going to have an appeal. And, most people enjoy sex, let's be honest. It's it's an enjoyable human experience. Consensual sex is an enjoyable human experience. There's no shame in that. It's one of the most natural things around. Um, so from that point of view, I really reject the whole Catholic eternal damnation mindset, and you get it in other religions as well. Because I believe it is a totally natural thing, provided it's consensual, of course. Um, and provided also we're talking about free thinking adults. So, I'm not getting into the realm of illegal activity, underage sex and that sort of thing, i.e., an adult with an underage person. Um, so there's two approaches, like, oh, it's not all it's cracked up to be, or oh, you're sex obsessed. Another one is kind of the patronizing religious one. Oh, you should wait until you're married. That's a lot of crap. I'm sorry, but it is. I respect people's decision for themselves to do it that way, but when they tell other people, I think that's. I mean, put it this way: it may be a long time before you find the right person to marry. So you're really saying that someone should put off that experience if they have the opportunities because they have to wait till they get married? I mean, again, if it's a personal choice, that's fine, but I don't think it's something you could dictate to others and pontificate to others. Um, I mean, for one thing, how are you supposed to find the right person if you don't have that experience? Because the thing about sex, it's it's not just um, a casual sexual release. It's not. It can be a human connection, and it can be a way to lead to a great relationship. Um, I mean, there are people who really do sleep around and they don't care. No, I honestly actually would think that life is quite boring after a while. It's like all good things. You overuse something great. I mean, my favorite films, I deliberately don't watch them very much because I find that if you enjoy something, if you get something out of it, the more you do it, it has a tendency to get more boring. Likewise, so for that reason, my impression is that, sex every single night would actually get boring after a while. Plus, it's reckless. But that's the other extreme. So, whether someone's waiting for months and months on end or they're having sex every night, in my view, both are problematic. Um, that would be my perception. And again, I'm not judging anyone, but I'm just saying surely that would get equally boring. But the religious mindset that you should wait, it kind of ignores the fact that how do you find the right person if you're not dating at least? Now, of course, dating doesn't mean going out and having sex, but if you're dating someone for a few weeks and things are going somewhere, inevitably in the modern world, in many circumstances, that does lead to sexual experience. And I really don't think there's anything wrong with that, provided it's consensual, provided both people are comfortable. What's the issue? I really, really don't think that it's an issue. Also, provided you're not cheating on anyone. That's the other caveat, I guess. Um, but really, the point I'm trying to convey here is that for someone going through this, and this is very much how I felt before I found the opportunity. It's incredibly frustrating, incredibly, and lonely, and it even creates anxiety, and it creates all sorts of problems. So I think as a society we need to be a little bit more understanding. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about it's crowd fund for involuntary celibates or anything like that, but I do want people to understand that it's it's not a small thing. I mean, particularly in laddish cultures, there's this thing about, oh, you're still a virgin, and you know, guys in particular really take the piss out of each other on this one, and they really shouldn't, because the thing is, when you're in that sort of social unit, you don't want to lose face, you don't want, so a lot of people will lie, and that's understandable because they don't want people to take the piss out of them. Now, I don't know how common this is. I don't know how sort of widespread it is. Um, So the other thing I want to talk about is the reasons why people are in this situation, because that's another thing. People say, stupid things like if someone mentions this, they say, "Oh, well, go out and find it." Yeah, that's you cannot give a simple answer to a problem like this because there's a range of reasons why people might find themselves in this position. It could be that they don't have the social connections, therefore they are not around people who they may get close to, and where that opportunity may arise. Some people have the ability to go into nightclubs and just go up to the nearest girl and say, "Hey, babe, want to come back to my place?" But the fact of the matter is, not everyone has that confidence. And even if they do have that confidence, it doesn't mean that she's going to say yes or he's going to say yes. In fact, for women, there's also those sort of expectations. If a woman done that, most guys would probably think she's a bit loose. And if a guy does it, he runs the risk of being seen as creepy. So I think the whole nightclub context has certain. I think you have to have a certain confidence to do it that way. But what I would say is that it isn't just a confidence issue. Some people may have no problem talking to others. They may have no problem talking to girls, talking to guys, if you're a girl or if you're gay. Um, but it isn't just about confidence; it's also about the opportunity. Because even in a dating scenario, that doesn't always lead to sex. The date may not work out, or the person may have a different mindset. She may want to wait much longer. He may want to wait much longer. So there's a lot of factors. There could also be social alienation for whatever reason. Perhaps someone is a carer. Perhaps all the time is taken up. Perhaps they have a physical disability that limits some of the opportunities they may otherwise have. That's not to say people with disabilities can't have active sex lives, because they do. But, there is a range of reasons that may cause these problems. And I'm not saying society should feel sorry for people in the position of involuntary celibacy, but I do think we should grow up as a society and understand it's not something to take the piss out of, and it's not a pleasant experience, because people going through this, they're not sex obsessed. They're not constantly thinking of sex, but we live in a society where you cannot escape. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, by the way. I'm just saying it's a fact. You cannot escape knowing that human sexual interaction is everywhere. All over the place. You see couples on billboards kissing. You see it's in films. It's everywhere. So, and incidentally, I'm not even. You can't even say that that is necessarily the issue, because in countries that are far more conservative, if we look at certain conservative Islamic countries, that actually has an even more negative effect. Because, in my opinion, by repressing sexuality, and this is also true of the Ireland of the past, by repressing sexuality, it actually creates very unhealthy problems. That's probably why there's a very high rate of sex crimes in countries like Egypt, because it is repressed. Um, and there's no justification for that, but it could be one reason. So we have to see sex as a normal thing. We have to see it as a normal but special thing. I don't think people should go around casually fucking each other. Not, it's none of my business. But all I'm trying to say is that the desire for a normal sex life is absolutely human. No one has a right to judge it. So no one has a right to say, "Oh, don't complain. It's not what's cracked up to be," or "Don't complain. You're always talking about sex." If you have had a relatively normal experience with that, then you've no right to judge someone who hasn't. You know. Uh, I'm going to round this up soon, but I would just make a few more points. So what's the solution? Well, there is no easy solution. That's the truth. But I have thought about this. There may be areas that need to at least be explored, and they will be controversial, but they at least need to be explored. When we talk about the prostitution debate, now, the hostility to prostitution tends to come from two groups, and it tends to be religious and moral groups, and it tends to be feminists, because both groups say they're opposed to it in different ways. For religious moralists, it's because it's immoral. It's buying sex, and for feminists, they believe it's exploitation of women. Um, I think both arguments have flaws. Certainly, if we're talking about a vulnerable young woman on the street corner, being controlled by a violent pimp, that is absolutely control. But the one important equation that feminists do forget is that it's a mutual trade. So the man is giving away sometimes significant amounts of money, um, and I don't think that should be underplayed. It's an exchange. He gets sex, she gets money. And I also think it's utterly absurd and frankly dangerous to compare prostitution to rape, as some feminists have tried to do. I think that actually degrades the seriousness of rape. No, I don't think prostitution is a good thing. And I don't want to morph this into a whole video about prostitution, but I'm just going to mention this in passing. It may be that the best solution is to have regulated legal prostitution zones. Now, that seems to me to be something that would be the lesser of two evils, in the sense that I don't think prostitution is particularly a good thing, but if it's a choice between having romantic sex or paying for sex and having sex with a total stranger, certainly the former would appear to be more appealing. But it could well be that some men visit prostitutes because they're in this position. And again, what right do people have to judge them? And some women, for that matter, because you get male prostitutes as well. Um, you get male escorts. I really think that people need to understand that this is, having acknowledged that there is a problem there, then look at the solution. I mean, it may be that this is the only avenue people in this position have. And to those who want to talk down and judge them, what right do you have? If you've had a relatively standard sexual upbringing, then what right do you have to judge people who haven't? What right do you have to tell them what to do? I really do believe that, and I think it's one of the biggest problems why this is really not discussed. This is an enormous amount of judgment. It's either taking the piss or it's judging the person as being some sort of sexual deviant, and it's wrong. So back to what I was saying about the prostitution issue. Perhaps in a regulated situation, it's best for everyone. In a regulated situation, there's far less chance of risks that you would get otherwise. Because, say, for example, you have a violent punter, a violent client. Um, it's unlikely that a sex worker is going to report that because she doesn't want to lose her trade. But in a legal situation, then it would be no different from, say, the shopkeeper of a wine merchant complaining that his goods have been stolen. And I don't think that's a crude comparison. I think if it's a legal situation, then she would be in a strengthened position. And so would the clients. They wouldn't be ripped off as well, by the way. That's another thing. Um, it happens quite often that guys find themselves being extorted for money in these situations. They think, they pay a certain price and they find out, some heavy comes in and charges 10 times the amount. That's also wrong. And, society generally doesn't have any sympathy. Oh, they say, oh, they think it's funny, this guy got robbed at the brothel. But what if that man is already going through the nightmare of involuntary celibacy? Then he's getting exploited. And no one talks about these things. So if I am being a bit edgy, if I'm being a bit out there, good. Because maybe these things do need to be discussed. I really think that every human being deserves the opportunity for consensual sex. I really do. It's a basic human experience. And once again, disclaimer, I'm not a virgin. So that's not where I'm coming from, but I am someone who the opportunity came to me late in life. And I just want to, I came across an article about a slightly unrelated matter and it just got me thinking about this. So I thought it would be a good video subject. Anyway, I hope there's been a few things there for, excuse me, for people to think about. Thanks for watching.